The Aryans in India evolved a distinct culture commonly known as the Aryan culture. In today's presentation, we will talk about the Rig Vedic period, its sources, original homeland of Aryans, early Aryan settlements and how they expanded, and then we will focus on the economic, social, political, and religious life of the early Vedic period. But before that, we have to understand that the Vedic age spans over a period from about 1500 BCE to 600 BCE, and it has been divided into two phases. First is the Rig Vedic period, and then we talk about the later Vedic period. The Rig Vedic period roughly spans from 1500 to 1000 BCE, and the time span of the later Vedic period is about 1000 to 600, about 600 BCE. Now these two periods correspond to two phases of Aryan expansion in India, and this is how we have divided the time span of the two periods of the Vedic age. When we come to the sources, the chief source of information on the early history of the Aryans in India are the Vedas. And just as the periodization has been done into Rig Vedic and later Vedic, so also the Vedic texts have been divided into two broad chronological strata. The early Vedic texts, to which mostly the Rig Veda belongs, and the later Vedic texts to which belong the remaining Vedas and their branches. So when we talk about the Rig Vedic sources, the primary source is the Rig Veda, which is considered to be the earliest text of the Indo-European languages. Rig Veda is basically a collection of prayers offered to gods like Agni, Indra, Mitra, Varun, etc. by various families or poets or sages. Rig Veda consists of 10 mandals or books, of which books 2 to 7 form the earliest parts, and books 1 to 10 seem to have been the later additions. In fact, the 10th mandal of the Rig Veda is a source of information for the later Vedic period. Now, before going into the details of their diverse lifestyle, we have to look into the original homeland of the Aryans. Now, a number of theories have been ascribed to this issue, the original homeland of Aryans. First of all, one theory is that Vedic Aryans were neither foreigners nor did they migrate into India. They were the indigenous people of India. But this theory has come under criticism. There are scholars who believe that this theory does not prove to be very valid, because first of all, they say that had India been the original home of the Aryans, they would have certainly tried to fully Aryanize the whole of the subcontinent before crossing the frontier barrier for some other lands. And the second one is that there are vast disparities between Harappan and Vedic cultures, which further prove that had the Aryans been the indigenous people, these disparities would not have been noticed. Then another theory is some European scholars, they assign the Baltic Sea region as the original home of the Aryans. Then we have Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who suggested that the polar region or the Arctic region was the original home of the Aryans. So there are a number of theories. Again, another very strong theory about the original homeland of the Aryans is that they came from somewhere in the steppes stretching from southern Russia to central Asia. From this region, they migrated to different parts of Europe and Asia, and one of their branches migrated to Iran. And from the Iranian tableland, they moved in the southeastern direction towards India, where they encountered the city civilization of the Indus Valley. Then we have another archaeological source which also talks about the original homeland of the Aryans, and an inscription has been discovered in Bogaskoi in Asia Minor, which was the capital of the ancient Hittites, and it is dated to 1400 BCE. Now, a treaty of the Hittite king mentions the Rigvedic gods such as Indra, Mitra, and Varun. So, this archaeological discovery or this inscription supports the theory that they came basically from Central Asia. However, there is a lot of discussion and there are a lot of opinions among historians about their original homeland. Let us see how they expanded. How did they settle? Where did they settle? And where did they expand? Now, the dispersal of the Aryans in India was not a single event, and it took place in several stages, covering several centuries and involving many tribes. Now, the earliest wave is represented by the Rig Vedic people who came to the subcontinent in about 1500 BCE, as we have already seen. And in the Rig Veda, the land where the Vedic Aryans lived is called by the name of Sapta Sindhu, or land of the seven rivers, which included the Indus with its principal tributaries on the west and the Saraswati on the east. Now, the whole of the territory known to the Vedic Aryans was divided into a number of tribal principalities which were ruled normally by the leaders or kings of various tribes. And the Indo-Aryans were basically engaged in two types of conflicts. First, they fought amongst themselves, and secondly, they fought with the pre-Aryans. So we have the evidence of inter-tribal wars like the Battle of the Ten Kings or the Das Rajan. This battle was fought between Sudas, a Bharat king of the Tritsu family, and a confederacy of 10 well-known tribes. This battle was fought on the banks of river Parushni, that is the current that is the Ravi river, and it was in this decisive battle, which was fought on the banks of river Parushni, the Bharats emerged victorious. And it is likely that there took place other intertribal wars also of this kind. Now, the chief opponents of the Aryans, when you talk about them, they were basically the indigenous inhabitants of non-Aryan origin, and there are many passages in the Rig Veda which show that there was a general feeling of hostility towards the people who have been described as Panis. Panis were the indigenous inhabitants of non-Aryan origin, and more hated than the Panis were the Dasas and Dasyus. The Dasas have been equated with the tribal people, uh, and they are sometimes considered as to be a branch of the early Aryans. And then there were Dasyus. In all probability, the Dasyus in the Rig Veda represent the original inhabitants of India, and they also were probably one of the chief opponents of Aryans. Now we come to the economic life of the Rig Vedic people. First of all, pastoralism. The early Vedic society was pastoral, cattle rearing being the main occupational activity. Now, what is pastoralism? Pastoralism is a subsistence strategy adopted by people who live in areas where large scale agriculture is not feasible due to some constraints, environmental or cultural constraints, and therefore cattle rearing. It it became the dominant occupational activity of the Rigvedic people. So cattle formed their most valued possession. The chief form of wealth was cattle. Prayers were made for the increase of cattle, and then we have several terminologies which reflect how important cattle, or for that matter cow, was. So we have the terms like gomat. A wealthy person was called gomat. Then gavishti. The battle for war came to be known as Gavishti. Then we have other terms like Gavyu, Gotra, Duhitri, etc., which also talk about the importance of the cow. And since cattle seem to have been tended by common herdsmen, it has been suggested that they were probably collectively owned by members of the tribe. Now, agricultural activities. When we, if we are talking about pastoralism, it does not mean that there were no agricultural activities. Nevertheless, there are very few references to agricultural activities. Only yav or barley is mentioned, no other grain is mentioned. Iron technology was not known to the Rigvedic people, and the copper implements that they used were not of much use in agriculture. Plus, there were no facilities for large scale irrigation. So, we find that the hoes and sickles and axes, which have been mentioned in the text, they were probably used for some kind of a shifting cultivation. And so the evidence of pastoralism as well as shifting cultivation suggests that the people were either nomadic or semi-nomadic. So pastoralism being the main occupation and a little bit of agriculture being also practiced, it shows that probably they were nomadic or semi-nomadic. When we talk about their arts and crafts, the Rig Veda mentions artisans like the carpenter, chariot maker, weaver, leather worker, pottery, etc. And this indicates that they practiced all these crafts. Now, the term ayas has been used for copper or bronze, and it shows that metal working was known. And as I've already said, they did not possess any knowledge of iron. What about commerce? The evidence of trade and commerce is very meager. Uh, Perhaps there was no concept of private property based on land ownership. Now, next we come to the society of the Rig Vedic period. First of all, we talk about tribe and family. So kinship was the basis of the social structure, and the people's primary loyalty was to the tribe, which has been called a Jan. Now the term Jan occurs at about 275 places in the Rig Veda, which talks about its importance, how important it was. Another important term which stands for tribe in the Rig Veda is the Vis, which is mentioned 170 times in the Rig Veda. Probably the Vis was divided into gram or smaller tribal units organized to fight. Now, the family, the basic unit of Aryan tribal society was a patriarchal family which is called the Kul, and the eldest male member of the family was known as Kulapa. And it also seems that several generations of the family lived under the same roof. And as it was a patriarchal society, the birth of a son was repeatedly desired, and people prayed to gods for sons. Uh, what about marriage and position of women? Now, in spite of the patriarchal character of the family, the position of women was much better in the Rig Vedic period than in the subsequent times. Women could attend assemblies, they could offer sacrifices, and the institution of marriage was also established. Polygamy was permitted, though monogamy was the rule. There was no system of sati in the Rig Vedic period, and so we notice the practices of niyog and levirate. Widows in certain cases were allowed to marry, and then we have no examples of child marriage also. Education was an important aspect of Rig Vedic life. It was imparted mostly orally. Now we have a frog hymn from the Rig Veda which shows a glimpse of the educational system. What is a frog hymn? This hymn gives a picture of the earliest Vedic school by the croaking of the frogs to the chorus of voices heard when a teacher recites the Veda and the pupils repeat his words after him. Then we have a number of women teachers, women scholars. Many of them possess the highest spiritual knowledge, for example, Gargi, Maitreyi, etc. The most important thing about the social life of the Rig Vedic period was that there were social divisions. There were divisions in society. And the factor that contributed most to the creation of social divisions was the conquest of the indigenous inhabitants by the Indo-Aryans. We have talked about Dasas and Dasyus. They were treated as slaves. And the Rig Veda also mentions the Aryavarna and the Dasvarna. Now, the tribal chiefs and the priests, they acquired a large share of the booty, and naturally they became wealthy at the cost of their kinsmen, thereby creating social inequalities in the tribe. And gradually the tribal society was divided into three occupational groups: warriors, priests, and the common people. Now the fourth division, called the Shudras, it appeared towards the end of the Rig Vedic period, not in the main time span of of the Rig Vedic period. Now we also find domestic slaves which were given as gifts to priests. When we talk about the food, amusements, and customs of the Rig Vedic people, rice and barley were the staple food. These were offered to Agni for every morning as being dedicated to God. Sur was a famous intoxicant. Some drink was used in all the home sacrifices. Music was known to them. They knew about chariot race, gambling, etc. The political life of the Rig Vedic period. Now, kingship was the same as tribal chiefship. So, the term Rajan was used for the tribal chief, and primarily Rajan or the tribal chief was a military leader, the chief of the tribe who fought for cows, not territory. So, here cows are important, battles are being fought for cows, not for territory. He ruled over his people and not over any specified area of land, and that is why he has been referred to as Gop Janase or Gopati Janase. The term Gopati basically indicating the protector of the herds of cattle. Now, very likely, the tribal chief owed his office to the choice of the people. Although we find that kingship was perhaps confined to certain families, then there were some popular assemblies. Several tribal or kin-based assemblies such as Sabha, Samiti, Vidat and Gan are mentioned in the Rig Veda. The Sabha was a council of the elder members of the tribe, and the Samiti was a general tribal assembly, less exclusive than the Sabha. The king's authority was substantially limited by Sabha and Samiti, which discharged judicial and political functions. How was the administration carried on? In the day-to-day administration, the king was or the tribal chief was assisted by a few functionaries. The most important of these seems to have been the Purohit. There are two priests who played a major role in the Rig Vedic times. Their names we know as Vashishta and Vishwamitra. Then a functionary called Senani is also referred to, although information about a regular standing army is lacking. We do not learn of any officer concerned directly with the collection of taxes, and the Rig Veda does not mention any officer for administration of justice as well. The officer who enjoyed authority over a large stretch of land or pasture land was called Vrajpati. He led to battle the heads of the families called Kulapas or heads of the fighting hordes called Gramanis. Now, initially, Gramani was just the head of a small tribal kin-based fighting unit called Gram. But when the unit settled, the Gramani became the head of the village, and in course of time, his position became the same as that of the Vrajapati. Then we also have Mahishi, the crown queen. Then we have the charioteer. And on the whole, if we sum up the political system, we could say that it had been certain rudiments of state had begun to appear, although not completely. And the political system, on the whole, was a tribal chieftainship devoid of a firm territorial basis, regular standing army, and an elaborate officialdom. Now, the religious life of the Rig Vedic period is very significant for understanding, in fact, their social and political, economic milieu as well. Religious ideas of the Vedic people are reflected in the hymns of the Rig Veda, and the Aryans found it difficult to explain the coming of the rains, the appearance of the sun and the moon, the existence of rivers, mountains, etc. And so they personified these natural forces and looked upon them as living beings to whom they attributed human attributes. Now we have a number of such divinities in the Rig Veda, which we find the reference to whom we find in the Rig Veda, and the Rig Vedic gods were predominantly male, as it was natural in a patriarchal society. Now we'll discuss about the main gods who were being worshipped in the Rig Vedic period. The most important was Indra. The largest number of hymns, 250 hymns, have been attributed to Indra in the Rig Veda. Indra was the god of strength who was invoked to destroy the enemies. He was also the god of thunder and rain, and always ready to smite the dragons and demons. He is credited with the sacking of many cities, and so he is also called Purandar or the breaker of forts. Next in importance to next in importance to Indra was Agni, who was a god of fire. To him, 200 hymns have been devoted in the Rig Veda. He was considered to be an intermediary between heaven and earth, that is between gods and men. And the importance of Agni can be related to that of the yajna or sacrifice in the early Vedic society. It was supposed that the oblations offered to Agni were carried to the gods in the form of smoke. The next important god was Varun, who personified water, and he was also the upholder of the natural order of the universe. People turned to him for forgiveness of sin, and one important thing about Varun is that, in spite of his importance, only a small number of hymns have been uh, addressed to Varun. Then we have Mitra. Mitra was closely associated with Varun, and only one hymn is addressed to him alone, separately. Som was considered to be the god of plants, and an intoxicating drink is named after him. An entire book, the ninth, is devoted to Som and the preparation of the Som juice. There were other gods also whom the Rig Vedic people mentioned. For example, Rudra. Rudra was the archer god, the father of Maruts, and was associated with storm. And he was also considered to be the guardian of healing herbs. Yam was the god of death and had an important place in the early Vedic religious belief. He became the guardian of the world of the blessed dead. Then we have some solar deities. Surya is the most concrete of the solar deities. He is considered to be the son of Dyaus and Aditi. Savitri is preeminently a golden deity, and it is a deity to whom the famous Gayatri mantra is addressed. Pushan acts as the envoy of Surya. He is also the guardian of roads, herdsmen, and straying cattle, and regarded as the deliverer from danger. Later on, we will see how the role of Pushan changes in later Vedic religious life. Then we have female divinities. As I said, it was a patriarchal society, so most of the gods who were worshipped were males, but there were female divinities also, although very few. Usha was the most important female deity, the goddess of dawn. Then we have Aditi, who was the great mother of gods, Ratri, the spirit of the night, Aranyani, lady of the forest, and Ila, goddess of offerings. Apart from considering the major gods and goddesses who were worshipped in the Rig Vedic period, another important aspect of Rig Vedic religion was sacrifice. Sacrifices, Vedic religion was sacrificial in nature, and sacrifices or yajnas were performed to invoke the gods in order to grant boons, either victory in battles or for acquisition of praja, that is children, pashu, that is cattle, food, wealth, health, and the like. Now, uh, for the Vedic people, or for the early Vedic period, religion was not based on magic or ritual formulae, but it stressed direct communication with the gods through sacrifices, hymns, etc. Gods were not worshipped for the spiritual upliftment of the people, nor for any other abstract philosophical concept, but they were invoked to grant material gains. So, the Vedic religion reflected the patriarchal pastoral society and was materialistic in perspective. So, here we end the Rig Vedic period, where we have talked in detail about the sources, the original homeland of the Aryans, their settlement and their expansion, and we have also talked in detail about their economic, social, political, and religious lives. Hope this video proves to be useful for you. If you have liked the video, please share it with others, and if you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to it, and please look out for my next video, which is going to be upon the later Vedic age. Thank you for watching. Thank you.